Hello and welcome to another episode of the Autoblog podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. Joining me on the phones, senior editor for All Things Green, Beltz Snyder. What's going on, man?
Hey, how's it going? It's a beautiful day here. My son's out playing around in the driveway with a scooter. Things are good.
It's good stuff. And on the other line, consumer editor, Jeremy Korzweniewski. How you doing, man?
I am not too bad. It's kind of sort of sunny here, but a little on the chilly side. But I'm indoors recording a podcast anyway, so I guess that doesn't matter.
It's true. It's true. It's nice here. It's sunny, a little cool still, but I think it's warming up. So we got a great show for you today. We're going to talk about the Jeep Gladiator Mojave. Jeremy just arrived at his house. He spent a little bit of time in it. Maybe we'll do some deeper impressions in a few weeks, but he's going to tell you a little bit about just how it feels, how it looks, that sort of thing. I rolled around in an Acura MDX. It was bright, kind of royal blue purple. Very nice vehicle. It was the A-Spec. So I spent a week in that. John has spent some time in our long-term Forester, as well as a Honda CR-V hybrid, I think. Is that right, John?
That's correct.
All right, the hybrid. That's cool. So we'll have kind of an SUV-centric podcast. Then we will spend your money. So buckle up. Let's get it started. Let's talk about the Mojave. So, Jeremy, I know you've got big plans for this, what you're going to do with it, things, that, will be cool. This is essentially our first drive. The actual first drive was canceled, of course, related to COVID-19, as all automaker-sponsored events were, and basically late February onward. But it's in your driveway. I got to believe it's at least getting some attention. What's it like so far?
Yeah, it is getting attention. I noticed the neighbors peeking through the curtain blinds when it got dropped off. The first thing is it looks great. It really stands out. It's in a bright medium blue color, and all the Jeep not the Jeep emblems, but the Mojave script and all that is in this like contrasting orange color. And the tow hooks also are in kind of like an orangey shade, and it sets off beautifully. I think anytime you can mix contrasting colors on a vehicle, it stands out, and the blue and the orange truly does that. I haven't had a chance to actually take it very far, just a couple spins around the block to test it out and see what's what. But I've put quite a bit of mileage on other Gladiators, and I can instantly tell that this one feels different. The tires are big and beefy. It's sitting up a little bit higher than what you'd expect out of a standard Gladiator, and it's got these great Fox shocks and a revised suspension. So the entire attitude of it. Is different. It sits differently on the road, drives a little bit differently, and I'm really looking forward to putting it through its paces. When we were on the Gladiator launch, we did a lot of low-speed, rutted, muddy, rock climbing kind of activities. And this is a different beast. This is more like, it's kind of like Jeep's answer to the Raptor. Not quite as hardcore as the Raptor is, but it's kind of in the same vein where they expect people are going to take this thing out and do some desert runs. So what I'm going to do is look for the worst, fire roads and poorly maintained roads that I can kind of get it up to speed and see how that new suspension system works out. But just sitting in my driveway, the thing looks beautiful. It elicits commentary like no other Jeep does, and they did a great job on the design of it. It's got this really great hood scoop that kind of really works with the Jeep 7-slat front end, and like I said, the color combination is just killer.
I'm actually a really big fan of the Gladiator. I think it's a great design statement. I think it's something Jeep actually really needed, and they don't truly need, there's not many gaps in their product lineup, but I think this is a smart move. And I think adding, Jeremy, to your point that it's like a desert runner, it's exactly like a smart move for them. You were saying something, John?
Well, yeah, Jeremy sent a photo over of the one in his driveway, and as much as I originally felt, if I was going to build one of these, I would probably want, more of a desert color. I always go for blue on pretty much everything. But that blue, it looks really nice in that.
It does.
And just the script on the side looks really, really, really cool. And yeah, it's a Gladiator. It's a Gladiator that's jacked up, and it looks super badass. We did some off-roading in a standard Gladiator, pretty much a base model, and it was great. Even at that level, I imagine this one would be just a ton of fun off-road.
Yeah. Did I tell you guys how much it costs?
Let me
You
guess. I'm going to say 61.
You're not far off. That's a little bit over. This one's just got the regular soft top. If you added the hard top, it would hit 61. This one, as it sits in my driveway, is $59,750. Which, I mean, that's just, I love the Gladiator, but every time, my big issue with it is every time that I think about a Gladiator, I fire up the Build It website on Jeep.com. And I mean, I tend not to like pile on the options on my own car. Like I get the things that I'm like, okay, I need this. I can't live without it. But if I'm like waffling on it, like, do I really want that? Do I not? I skip it because that tells me I don't need it. It's basically impossible to spec a Gladiator with just a bare minimum of things that you'd actually want in the real world for less than like $45,000. Like even with the regular soft top, sticking with the 6-speed manual, not paying extra for the automatic that I wouldn't want, and just like picking the basic things that you want, like the active cruise control, the track lock, the tow package, the auxiliary switches, like the 7-inch touchscreen, just to get the basics. It crests $40,000, and I'm like, that is just so much money for like basic, like what 2 generations ago, what like the Wrangler was like this stripped down, one of the least expensive ways you could get into a convertible. Back like when they were advertising YJs, like the old square headlight Wranglers. I remember paging through Car and Driver and Road and Track and Motor Trend at the time, and they had this big ad with a red Wrangler on it that said, it listed its base price, which I don't remember, it was like $13,900 or something like that back at the time. And it was like America's cheapest convertible. I'm like, man, I wish that Jeep still had like a really base spec package on the Wrangler and the Gladiator for like people that was like, they just wanted an off-road mount, wanted to be able to take the top off and like have that kind of experience, but didn't want all that extra stuff that costs money. They don't have anything like that.
Yeah, I found that you pay a premium across the Jeep lineup now. It doesn't matter the model. If it has the Jeep grill on it, it's going to cost a few $1,000s more than comparably spec'd competitor. And I'm glad that Jeep is so cool. It's something that people want and people lust after. But yeah, that sucks for the enthusiasts who just want the base Jeep that they can go ramble around on the streets in the winter and take it off road on some of the trails. But there's a used market, and there's always the CJs. You can always find a CJ for a few grand, and
man, even used ones are getting expensive though.
I know. It's a bummer, man, because I've been wanting one. I've been wanting a CJ forever. A CJ and a Volkswagen Beetle are 2 cars that I've considered buying over the past 10 years, and I've never done it. And yeah, the CJs are getting more and more expensive.
I remember.
You basically can't find them online. You have to be lucky and drive by one, on some rural highway up north, and someone's selling them.
Right. Yeah. I had a 1990 that I got in, I don't know, maybe 96, 97, something like that, when it was just like a used vehicle. And I remember it was $5,600, and it had low mileage on it, and it was in good shape. That same exact, it was a YJ. That same exact YJ now would be twice that.
Yeah.
which I'm like, that's crazy for me to think of. It's like, it's still just a basic used car with 100,000 miles on it. Whatever.
Yeah, it's one of those things too, where like, that's always the conundrum with the Gladiator and the Wrangler is you're like, wow, really get into this. I really like so many different things about them, but it's like, oh geez, they just, the options and just the things add up so quickly, and it's a little tough. It's a little frustrating. I think the last Wrangler I actually was in was the Eco Diesel, and it was sometime around the holidays. So it's been about 5-6 months. But that one, geez, I want to say it was like 50, easily 60, somewhere in there. And it was just like, unless you really like want a diesel, I personally probably wouldn't pay for that premium, even though it was kind of fun to drive. It was interesting, that's for sure. As an auto journalist, I feel like I got to give bonus points for the diesel powertrain.
Right.
And it was cool. Looked cool. Yeah, I don't know. That's a tricky one with Jeep. I think one thing you kind of got to think about with Wranglers and Gladiators is they're basically premium models. Like, you really got to kind of look at that as like, if you're looking for really basic utilitarian transportation with functionality, Wrangler and the Gladiator really aren't it, unless you get the most basic one, because otherwise you're at 40 grand with like one or two options, and that's fine. Right. That's what they are. But, based on their capability, and I think frankly, you do pay for that. Like, you very much pay for the brand, it's like, it's like an expensive watch, it may have the same Swiss movements as something else, but you're paying 4 times as much because it says one thing as opposed to the other. So, yeah, I don't know. This is a question I ask every now and then. Wrangler or Gladiator? It's irrespective of nothing, but it seems like they cross-shop each other. What do you think?
Wrangler. Wrangler, more off-road capability. I like the shorter wheelbase, and I won't have friends asking me to help them move.
I feel like I maybe asked this question with both you guys before. So
you may have,
so
you may have. And I'd go Gladiator because like it's a vehicle that can kill so many so many birds with one stone. That's a weird expression, but it's got the cool off-road, it's got the fun in the sun, it's got the great winter capability, and for an added bonus, it's a truck, and it's got the usefulness and utility out of it. I don't know that many people that are going to ask me to move, so I guess I'm not that concerned about it.
The Gladiator almost does too much, It's too versatile.
I really like the Gladiator, but I would still personally probably choose a Wrangler just because of, I like sort of it's not really an SUV, but it's essentially an SUV. You get that covered closed hatch and you could put a fair amount of stuff back there. So I like that as opposed to like the hauling nature of them. They drive about the same as far as the power, but I sort of like the squat, like turning, like the way a Wrangler steers versus a Gladiator, which naturally feels a little more truck-like. So, I mean, they're both awesome, but I would land on a Gladiator. I think 4-door.
You mean you'd land on a Wrangler, you mean?
What's that?
You mean you'd land on a Wrangler?
Yes. Did I say Gladiator?
Yeah,
whoops.
We got you, though.
One of those.
We got your back.
There we go. But yeah, so yeah, that's kind of our Jeep obsession. I hope you get to go off-roading with this thing, Jeremy. Should be fun.
Oh, I totally will. I just got to sort it out probably this weekend.
Sweet. Well, let's move on to another SUV that stayed very much on road. That was the Acura MDX. I had it for about a week. Teaser alert, it was replaced yesterday with an Acura NSX. So we're going to definitely talk about that on the podcast. Stay tuned. But I drove this for a bit. I would say this, it's more interesting than I remember. I've often thought Acura's SUVs, I feel like they're just kind of like in the middle of a segment. Their design is interesting. The A-Spec is certainly interesting. It's sporty. The interiors are mostly nice. This one's got a lot of stitching, a lot of like perforated leather. There's still a fair amount of like sort of like hard touch like surfaces, especially like at the top part of the dash, which, I mean, I guess for 50, this one came in at $56,295. It felt a little, maybe not great, but also I've seen this stuff in BMWs and Cadillacs, so I guess I won't ding them too hard for it. I feel like you kind of would buy this because you're like maybe, correct me if I'm wrong here. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts, but like this is definitely a vehicle like you would be cross shopping it with a Lexus and maybe an Infinity, and maybe you've like the German stuff is either expensive or it's not like the right vibe, and you want that like sort of like Acura kind of feel, and it's a little understated except in A-Spec trim, but yeah, it's just, to me, it's very much like a middle of the road, like moderate entry. And that sort of defines Acura, even though they do have a great racing and performance history for sure. It's interesting. I've talked to them. I talked to one of their designers, Dave Merrick, and he actually said it's a point of frustration. He's like, we have some of the greatest racing accomplishments ever, but why do people think we don't make performance cars? And then boom, they had the NSX out. So, I think they're definitely trying to kind of, project off of halo cars like the NSX, which, believe me, I'm going to have no problems getting fired up about that. But to bring it back here with the MDX, I think it looks pretty good. I like it. I like, there's like some fender flares that's sort of kind of like, the grille is very pronounced, very definitive. A-Spec trim adds, some more kind of like racy bits, if you will. The interior is a little more dressed up. Solid powertrain, 290 horsepower, 3.5 liter. This is the VTEC V6. It's got, it's hooked up to the 9-speed automatic. And of course it has super handling all-wheel drive, or SHAWD, as I've heard people call it. So it's good. I wouldn't put it at the top of the segment. I actually think the A-Spec package does spice it up enough that I would consider getting it, because I really kind of like the sports seats. There was some Alcantara like inserts in there. That was cool. Sporty pedals, whatever. You don't even see those. The 20-inch alloy wheels you do see though. And then there's some more LED lighting on it. So, I mean, that's, it's very much standard, straight out of central casting A-Spec vehicle. Yeah, I mean, it steers pretty well for the segment. I think that's kind of a cool thing. Again, the powertrain's solid. Yeah, I mean, for me, this one's like right in the middle. Not great, not awful, pretty good. It's very much going to compete against its sort of natural rivals, and probably not, steal like, somebody who generally tends to lean towards a German or an American brand. It is what it is.
Yeah, the MDX is a car I kind of always forget about, just because you don't see them very often. And I think that sort of is some of the appeal to it too. It's different than the rest. I'd argue it's closest to maybe the Lexus, but it's still got its own distinct personality in terms of styling, and I like that. And I think if you want to stand out, or just you're bored with the rest of the field because you see them all the time. This is a good option. And every time I get in it, I'm reminded that I actually do really like this car. It drives well. That super handling all-wheel drive was, a decade ago, or 8-9 years ago. It was one of the ones that you really liked, that you looked for. That was, you compared other all-wheel drive systems to it, and I think it still holds up. I mean, the rest have sort of caught up, but Acura has been making good cars for a really long time. I've liked a lot of their cars over the past. The TL, remember that one? That one was just fantastic, and the RDX was underrated, and the ZDX, and this, I mean, it's just a carry on of that spirit, which sort of flies under the radar, but every time I touch it, I like it quite a bit. And I'm reminded of why I've liked it for, since the first time I drove an Acura.
It definitely does have, I would say there is a bit of a cool factor to it. If you rolled up, wherever you're trying to roll up in your premium, crossover.
Daycare.
Yeah. I mean, you stand out, especially this one, which is, it's like a bright royal blue, purple. I'm trying desperately to find the actual like color on here, which I can't seem to find. But I mean, just the color alone and the A-Spec stuff really kind of, makes it stand out for sure, which I think is good. They call it Apex Blue Pearl. Okay.
Nice.
So yeah, and I mean, like I said, it looks different. I think there's, honestly, it's a little bit of a dated design in some ways. Like when I look at it, I'm like, oh yeah, the sides are kind of slab-sided. The headlights have it's a little bit more of a dated look. They're simpler than you might see in like a Mercedes or a BMW or certainly a Cadillac or Lexus vehicle with all those light shows they put out there. So I liked it. I mean, it's the kind of thing where I think what's nice about Acura is there is like, oh, hey, that person's driving Acura. Okay, not that you're trying to project an image like, hey, not that they've made it, but I think there's some brand, solid branding there. But it's also understated too. Like, you could roll up and, somebody's gonna be like, oh, well, hey, that's cool, but they're maybe not gonna assume like certain cars have negative connotations. So.
I have a couple thoughts on the MDX.
Please.
So here's an interesting factoid, or maybe a couple interesting factoids. 8 years in a row now, in 2019, Acura sold more than 50,000 MDXs per year. That makes it the best-selling three-row in the luxury crossover segment.
That's wild, man.
That is very wild.
I feel like you're living in Detroit, where I
just don't see them very often. But it's, I mean, that's just a fact. More than 50,000 8 years in a row. Best-selling three-row luxury crossover of all time, as a matter of fact. And up until
that's amazing.
Up until 2018, when the RDX got its most recent redesign, the MDX was Acura's best-selling model, and it's still number 2 behind the redesigned RDX. So they definitely don't have a problem selling them. They move a good number of them, and those have got to be profit machines for Acura, Honda. But I think the fact that the RDX, pushed past it, with this latest redesign indicates that the MDX is definitely in line for a major update. I don't think it's been updated significantly since 2014, something like that. And that's too long. 6 years, it's got to be, it's had some refreshes. The A-Spec, I think, to Greg's point earlier, the A-Spec is how I would want one if I were to buy one. I had one for a week about 6 months ago, and I echo everything that you guys have said. Like, it's every time you get in it, you're like, okay, I like this thing. It's a good solid vehicle. It drives well, it rides well, it's roomy, third row when you need it. The one that I had was like pearl white with a black leather interior with red highlights and Alcantara, like what Greg was saying. And it was quite nice. Like, I took a couple people for rides that week, and everyone had good things to say about it. And I had good things to say about it after it went for a week. But then you immediately forget it. Like, if I were to say what's the best-selling three-row luxury crossover, you wouldn't have said MDX.
No way.
Because we just don't think about it. Like, it's like, we know that it's there, it's in the pack, but it's like mainstream and doesn't stand out at all. That doesn't make it bad. I think I get why a lot of buyers look at their options and choose to get it, especially after taking a test drive, because it's nice, but I think it's desperately in need of a pretty significant refresh.
Part of me kind of like the charm that it almost felt like a little bit older. I don't want to drop the 4Runner card on it, because it's not that old. But, you know, there's a little simplicity to, like, you know, again, the looks, they feel like, you know, it's definitely a little bit of a dated look. Who do you think, I'm curious, where do you think this car fits? Who's cross-shopping it? Like, what are its closest rivals? Like, I was going to say, obviously, Toyota or Lexus and Infiniti. I'm curious what you guys think.
It fits in kind of a funny spot in between, and you know, like if you're to look at Lexus's lineup, the RX that sells a ton is the 2-row. They did just introduce the 3-row L version, but that 3rd row in the RX is nearly unusable.
Yeah.
It's so small, and I mean the headroom and I mean, I don't think Lexus is going to make major inroads in the 3-row until the next RX design, when they can really prioritize that. And then the next 3-row Lexus is the GX, which is a big truck-based SUV. So I don't think, I think it doesn't have a lot of direct competition if someone's specifically looking for a 3-row Japanese luxury crossover. The Infiniti that it would compete against is the QX60, which is itself in the same boat as the MDX, in that, like, no one immediately thinks of the Lexus QX60 as, you know, the 3-row luxury SUV to buy. You know, like, it's another, you know, I don't mean to use the term also ran, but like, you think of that even less than you think of the MDX, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
So then you got to look at the German and American brands. There's Lincoln, which makes some pretty darn good vehicles that could compete against it now, and Cadillac, who just came out with the XT6, but man, that thing gets pricey fast. The XT5 is not a direct competitor. It doesn't have the seating arrangement. So, you know, it's kind of occupies this interesting spot. You know, it's not an SUV, it's a crossover. It's luxury from a premium Japanese brand, and I think a lot of people are looking for that.
Yeah, I think it really ticks a lot of boxes. I think it's, you know, nice without being, you know, over the top. I think it, you know, like I said, it's premium without being, like, I don't know, condescending, if you will.
Yeah.
Like, there is,
It's
like,
tasteful.
you know, American cars tend to be brash, and I think that's a thing Cadillac tries to steer into.
Yeah.
German cars can, you know, really go all up and down the spectrum as far as how...
A little ostentatious, maybe.
They can, 100%. So Acura is definitely a very, like, you know, moderate luxury. And I thought that was the right tone for them, because it draws in a wide range of customers. And I mean, the other thing is, John, you and I talk about how we don't see them. You do see these things in California and, like, you know, up and down the coasts. I think the MDX is built in East Liberty, Ohio. I'm kind of pulling that out of thin air. So, Jeremy, you might see a few more of these. But
I don't see a ton of them here in Ohio, but I saw them all over the place in Seattle. Very popular West Coast vehicle.
Interesting.
All right. Well, that's probably about as much as we need to talk about the MDX. I will say this. I did go get pizza with it, and that worked out pretty well. The curbside pickup was outstanding. Pop the
Gotta
trunk.
ask what kind of pizza.
Buddy's Pizza, Detroit original deep dish.
That's the good stuff.
Got their half baked. That worked out great. You just bring it home and bake it the rest of the way. And then you guys will like this. I wrapped it up with a run to a local brewery. Got some gin and some beer.
Which brewery?
Griffin Claw.
Oh, Griffin Claw's got gin?
Yep. Yeah, they have gin. Cool. It's a really good gin. So
I'll have to try that.
They're mostly doing just growler fills near me, and you got to buy a new growler, because they don't take your old growler, because they're not going to take the time to sanitize it and all that. So I've been just buying cans and stuff. I haven't had, like, proper draft beer. Well, I've got my own draft beer that I've made, and I have been drinking a little bit of that. But I miss. That was the one thing, not to go on a tangent, but I was talking to my wife the other day, and we were just talking about, this pandemic thing. It's terrible. Like. But being locked in the home, we're doing okay. Like, we like each other. We like spending time with one another. We're binge watching cooking shows, and we're drinking, you know, wine and sitting there, and I mean, we're fine. But, like, the one thing that I'm really missing and itching to do is to get out and support some local breweries. That's kind of like my thing that I like to do after a long work day, is just, like, you know, pop in for a pint or two. And shoot the breeze with the bartender, and then go home and finish my my evening routine. That's what I'm looking forward to most is kind of just getting out and like feeling like I'm an actual member of a society more than just under my own roof.
I might have to, like, tonight, it's pretty nice out and we're kind of in between what we're going to cook for dinner. So I'm thinking I might need to pop one of those tall boys from Griffin Claw, a nice like pint in a can. And it's times like this, like you, Jeremy, I'm definitely missing just like a cold draft,
Yeah.
just like something right out of the tap. I kind of miss that, and
with sports on in the background, sports that don't exist right now.
yeah, I mean, just like literally any baseball game, and that would be amazing.
Here's what I'm going to do.
Now,
Yeah, that'd be great.
Here's what I'm going to do to be super meta. I'm going to drink a Griffin Claw beer while watching our off the clock Autoblog off the clock video that we filmed at Griffin Claw.
There we go. That's
there you
right.
Go.
I forgot about that. Yeah. Those were fun episodes.
That was fun.
Jeremy got bit by that spider.
Oh yeah,
oh, man,
Jeremy was bit by a spider. You got off the plane and your foot swelled up, and that was like the costliest video shoot ever. You almost died.
Well, I didn't almost die per se, but I was a little worried about the foot for a while. I've never swelled up like that, and the fact that it kept coming back, and this is probably too much information for all of our Autoblog podcast listeners, but it's totally recovered now. Just a spider bite, the last thing you want is for that sucker to get infected, and when it does, you might be in for a little bit of a long recovery.
So if anyone goes back and watches those Autoblog off the clock videos, just think about Jeremy sitting there with a big festering spider bite in his foot.
It was hard to take my shoe off after those videos. I had to fly back home from Detroit to Seattle, and I couldn't get my shoe back on to go back through security afterward. It swelled up so bad.
That's a pretty awkward thing, I can imagine. I mean, now, could you imagine that happening? Like, you're trying to get through security and your foot's swollen. They'd be like, sir, not only you have to leave the airport. They'd probably like drag you out of there. And
I was this close. Like, I was looking around, and if there would have been a guy like with a wheelchair, I'd have flagged him. But like, I didn't see him. And by the time I was like 100 yards away from my exit gate, I'm like, okay, I'm just doing this. And I hobbled all the way without a shoe on through the airport, through security, picked up my car. But yeah, I totally should have wheelchaired it. That would have been great. I did a trip to the zoo with a big, huge swollen foot, and I had my niece push me around in a wheelchair the entire time. And the zoo serves draft beer.
Oh, nice.
So it was the greatest trip to the zoo that I've ever experienced. I was seeing the cool animals. I was being pushed in a wheelchair and drinking draft beer. Best zoo experience.
That's the Toledo Zoo, right?
That was a Columbus Zoo.
Columbus Zoo. Both good zoos.
Yeah. Both good zoos.
The Detroit Zoo has a number of like wine tastings and like beer tastings. So I'll say this, like Buzzed Zoo could be kind of fun, obviously take your Ubers and your Lyfts or whatever home. But yeah.
Have we gotten way off track?
I think we have. We should probably do a long-term update on the Forester, which John has had. And I believe you took it in for some service recently, right?
I did. So I was driving it. I went on my birthday. I went to pick up some Indian food. And while I was waiting in the alley for the guy to bring the food out, my phone dropped down the side of the car, down the side of my seat. And I reached down to get it, and I'm groping around for it, and I feel the carpet's wet. And I was like, man, did I spill water? No, I haven't. I hadn't driven the car in a couple days. And so I get my food, go home, take another little look, and yeah, there's definitely kind of a lot of water down there. I told Zach, he said, yeah, I'll make an appointment, keep an eye on it the next day. More water. And I take it to the dealership, a local Subaru dealership, Dunning, where I used to take my car. So they're good people. I trust them and everything. Turns out that there was a leak. There was a crack in the sunroof drain tube. Which is something I have never really thought about. I just think, that's sealed off or whatever. There's a little drain tube and somehow that goes into when it was broken, it was leaking inside the bottom of the vehicle and pooling under the driver's seat. And so they fixed that. It was all under warranty. But yeah, it was just a really weird sort of thing to break and to have happen. It's just an odd thing. Like, where's this way? It didn't smell like anything, and then, all the windows were shut, the doors were shut. It's like, how's this water getting inside the cabin? And it was only under the driver's seat. But yeah, thankfully it was only water, and it was an easy fix. Going to the dealership was interesting during all this. Wearing a mask in there, you're just sort of in and out. You have to sort of get things explained to you over the phone. Couldn't really, talk you through it in person. But it was one of those things where I could go online and look up the part number and figure out sort of what was going on. So yeah, that was interesting. And then I had the Forester in my driveway for a few days, overlapping with the Honda CR-V hybrid. So I got to sort of do some comparisons with those. I did there's a cup holder comparison. I had to test out the Nalgene and a bunch of different things. I tested the car seat. It sounds boring, but I like one of the cars better for car seats, and it's probably for a reason most people wouldn't expect. But yeah, the CR-V hybrid was good too. I really liked it. I think I'd rather drive an Escape hybrid than that, but it drives really well. It's quiet. It's nice. It's refined. I didn't drive a whole bunch, but it was a nice thing to have while I was airing out the carpet of the Forester.
I would say, that's a tough one. I've driven several Escapes. Haven't driven the CR-V hybrid, but I've driven the CR-V quite a bit. I think I'd probably come down on a CR-V hybrid versus the Escape hybrid, but it would be a close one. I'd probably have to compare prices and specs and range and all that good stuff. I generally like the CR-V a little bit more than the Escape, although the new one is very, very good, the new Escape. So that's a great comparison. Yeah. Any other CR-V hybrid notes? Did you do anything with it besides any essential errands, any gin runs?
Yeah, no gin runs, just the grocery store.
Nice.
Really. And, sort of took the long way to the grocery store, if you will. But comfortable car. The interior is very practical. It's not, and this is a Honda thing. Like the interiors are very, very well thought out, and it's very form follows function more than anything else, in my opinion. But they managed to make it look good too. It doesn't look as good as some other designs out there, but the material quality is decent. But it does look fairly utilitarian. But I liked it quite a bit. I was able to fit a Nalgene in the back door, the door pocket cup holder, but not anywhere else. But it doesn't fit anywhere in the Subaru, so it won there.
Cool. Well, that sounds like a pretty good, pretty crossover heavy podcast so far. We should probably spend some money. Long-time listener, been listening since the very beginning. Goes back to when there was an Autoblog Green podcast. I don't remember that. Do you remember that, John?
No, that was before my tenure.
Yeah. Wow. So great. Thanks for listening all these years. We're happy to spend your money. So, do you remember that, Jeremy? Side note, you've been here the longest, an Autoblog Green podcast.
There was an Autoblog Green podcast for a while, and I don't know exactly when that stopped. But our good friend Sebastian Blanco used to do an Autoblog Green podcast. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so this the writer here has owned a 71 Malibu 307, got in high school. He says it passed away tragically, so I assume that was some sort of crash. Then he had a 2010 Chevy Cobalt, and when the clutch died, he got a 13 Malibu. This guy's been driving a lot of Chevys. That's quite the transition from a 71 Malibu to 2010 Cobalt. Malibu's at a 105. Wow. Needs significant repairs and replacements. This has been going on throughout its life. Car's paid off, doesn't need a new ride, but he's looking for something. So cool. Sounds good. We're happy to help. He used to want a second-gen CTS for the looks of performance, but he thinks they're getting a little long in the tooth to actually replace his. I'd probably agree with that. That's the second-gen CTS have been around for a while. So here is the criteria. He's looking for a CPO under 45,000 miles for about 20 to 25 grand. He lives in South Central Pennsylvania. So in his shopping so far, he's like in the ATS. I think that's just based on your history and what you've described. That seems like a pretty good option. But more criteria: all-wheel drive, solid engine, lots of content, etc. Also like the A4/A5. Looked around at the CLA as well. His fiance thinks the ATS is for old people. I would disagree with that. I think there's some Cadillacs that are, but I don't think the ATS is. Concerned about the maintenance of, a German vehicle. Commutes about 60 miles round trip, and he has on-street parking. Looking for us for other ideas. If we should think about something beyond entry-level luxury. So this really speaks to our earlier conversation, going back to the MDX, different segment, but people really have their preferences and what they're looking for in what these luxury brands stand for. Cadillac, Acura, Lexus, BMW. They all kind of stand for a different kind of thing. Anyways, let's kick it to you, Jeremy. What do you think?
So I was looking at his history, and he seems like the kind of guy, if he had a V8 Chevy Malibu 71, which is a super cool car, by the way. I love that body style. And he's thinking of, something like a CTS or an ATS, which are rear-wheel drive, kind of sporty vehicles. The certified pre-owned is for $20,000 to $25,000 is the hard part here, because most of what I would recommend are like the higher-end versions. Like if you could get an ATS V, that's super sweet. Just an absolutely rocking car to drive. Anything of that GM Alpha chassis is excellent. I do have to disagree with your fiance. I'm sure she's a lovely person, but she's wrong about the ATS. It's not a car for old people. It's a fun car to drive. And I wouldn't, if you can maybe let her test drive it and see that it's not a car for old people. Vehicles that compete with the ATS are, the Lexus IS can be kind of fun. It's a little bit on the sporty side. I doubt you're going to get one certified pre-owned in your price range. Cadillacs depreciate pretty rapidly, so that might be why they're falling into where you're looking at. But I'm going to take a flyer on this one, leave the entry-level luxury segment, and I'm going to go to a good old-fashioned American V8 rear-wheel drive option. I don't know that you'll find one certified pre-owned because I just didn't sell very many of them. You might have to do a nationwide search if you needed CPO.
Oh, I know where this is going.
If you're willing to forego the CPO, I did a search within 500 miles from myself, and I found some Chevy SS's.
Greg's
V8
applauding
rear-wheel
if
drive.
people can't hear that.
Greg likes it. A V8 rear-wheel drive, super sporty, absolutely a blast to drive. And you can find them. I found a nice one with 46,000 miles on it for $26,000. I would definitely consider that if you're willing to maybe forego the CPO or can find one somewhere in your budget.
That is an outstanding choice. I think given his history and just his real, he doesn't say he's a GM loyalist, but it sure sounds like he is.
Yeah.
that's like basically the unicorn, and it's the perfect choice. Some compromises. The interior in that thing is not great. I like how it looks, but some people thought it looked old, which it was. It's, a very old Holden, so there's that. But that's a really strong choice. I've got like 2 or 3, but I want to hear what you think, John.
Okay. Well, first of all, I have to concur that the ATS is definitely not an old person's car. I went on the press launch of that and got to drive that on track, and it was a hoot. I have in the past tried to convince people to buy this who were interested in it. So that's what I'm gonna go with as my choice. I think the ATS is a super solid choice. It's a lot of fun, looks great, and seems to be right in the wheelhouse of the things that this reader wants and needs from a car. I don't know. I also really like the A4, the Audi A4. That's going to be way different than what you're used to. If you're looking for a drastic change, something way more architectural and clean than the brash, brazen sort of American aesthetic, give it a shot. Give it a test drive. It might be just what you're looking for if you're tired of that other stuff. But if you're not, the ATS is a good call. I haven't driven the Chevy SS, but I know enough about it to know that that if you guys like it, that's got to be a good one too. But the ATS is what I'm coming down on.
Ooh, good choice. Good choice. That's sort of like my kind of lean right now. It's just like ATS. You could get them right in that price range. I think they look great. I think the chassis are brilliant. The interiors are actually decent. I think the ATS is one of those Cadillac/GM interiors that they were able to kind of get right, especially if you find it in the right trim. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of my lean. Just to really think out loud, though, you could get a decent 3 Series in this price range. So if you want to change it up, kind of like what John said, might be at least worth a test drive. Same with the A4. It might be, I would honestly say if you're thinking at all of changing it up, you might want to go try maybe an Audi and or a BMW just because, hey, why not? I think we always say take a test drive. It's fun. Maybe in this coronavirus time, it's not. But, assuming we get past this and it's more safe to go do these things, those are interesting cars to consider. I'm going to throw a curveball at you, kind of like Jeremy's SS. I'm going to go with a Regal GS. Those things are fairly high powered. They fit in that price range. There was a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine that was pretty strong. It was very power dense, very torquey. You get, if you like Jeremy's Holden underpinnings, you might like Buick's sort of Opel underpinnings. This is a really good chassis as well.
Optional all-wheel drive as well.
Optional all-wheel drive. This is a better car than I think people remember. I think it was very good for the mid 2010s. I'm not sure it aged all that well, but in the interior, if you're a little not sure about General Motors interiors, Buick is probably not the interior you want to dive into and look for something that surprises and delights. But that would be my curveball. So all that being said, you got the Audi, you got the BMW, you got the SS, you got am I leaving anything else out here? And then the ATS. I would still come back and say, based on that you kind of have a GM pedigree, the ATS is probably what you're looking for. That's how I would land.
Smart.
All right. Well, thanks for writing.
I like it because you picked what I picked.
Well, that was my lean from the start too. Usually what I'll do is when people write in for Spend My Money, I'm like, yeah, that's about right. And I'll kind of confirm it. Or my other 50% of the time, maybe a little bit less, I'll be like, no, it's not what I would do. Mm-hmm. And you start kind of reverse engineering it. So
I like coming in with a suggestion that someone might not have immediately been considering. Hey, think about this.
Yeah. You and Joel are both really good at that.
I try to come up with something a little bit funky.
Yeah.
I would say Joel is perhaps our best all-around spend my money person. No offense to anybody, but he is just, the stuff he comes up with, not just the oddball stuff, but like the reasoned, thought out stuff. Like it's really the best of all worlds. I'm more likely to throw some screwball car at you and say, well, this might be interesting. But he really backs it up. So, so yeah. So I guess we'll leave it there. This has been a fun show, guys. Glad to hear your quarantines are going well. Jeremy, have fun with that Jeep. I think that's going to be
yeah.
I hope you get some off-roading and, maybe you take it to a local brewery and they can throw it in the back or something and like that's a great curbside pickup vehicle right there. Just throw it in the bed. You have maybe like a crate or something back there. They drop the growler in and...
Well, I just need to figure out how many kegs can fit in the bed of a Gladiator. And I mean, that's what the corporate card's for, right, Greg?
Oh, there you go. Right. That won't get audited.
It's for testing.
That won't get audited at all. I'm sure you'll
testing
be totally
purposes. Clear. I have to review this car.
There you go. We're always getting, it's a work from home expense, right? So
yeah, put it down as office supplies.
Office supplies. Yeah, it's a growler. Yeah. Anyways, so we should leave it there. Thanks for listening, everybody. Be safe out there. You just listened to the Autoblog podcast. We'll see you next time.